Part 41. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 401. King Wei stared at the woman who spoke. But the woman kept in mind what the mysterious young man said: when you meet a young man claiming to be Xie, hold his legs tightly and shout for help, and then tell the truth about your appeal. She felt confident and begged loudly. Crying blood, the little woman's son was brought into the palace by Prince Yan and suffered a night of torture. He is only 15 years old. He is only 15, sir. He is still a child. Please save him. King Wei also threatened, tell me, I want to take the young woman's 12-year-old daughter into the palace and give it to the prince as his concubine. Please help me. Xie Jin lowered his eyes. Do you mean what you said? Everything is true. If you dare to say even one false word, the little woman will die a good death. The woman shouted hoarsely. The little woman's son studies hard at home every day. He has a good nature and never does evil to others. The disaster is coming. The little woman can't figure it out. She has been having nightmares for the past 2 days and she doesn't know who she has offended. Okay, Xie Jin interrupted her. His tone was calm and unwavering, and he turned to the other women. Are you all victims too? Mrs. was slightly frightened and said quickly, no, no, they are helping the little lady to support the show. Please don't punish them. To support the scene? Xie Jin was non-committal, raised his lips and said, should King Wei return this aunt's son to others, or should I lead people in to search for him? King Wei's expression could not be described in other words besides being ugly. He glanced coldly at the women kneeling on the ground and said coldly, I have something to tell you. There's nothing to say, Xie Jin said calmly. King Wei, please don't embarrass me. Who is handling the case? Only after I solve this woman's matter can I go all out to investigate the case in Prince Wei's house, hoping to clear Mr. Yan's innocence as soon as possible. Otherwise Mr. Yan will probably have to spend the new year in prison. King Wei's expression changed and he couldn't say a word. At present, stubborn resistance can no longer solve any problem. The incident happened in the palace of the Prince of Wei. Xuan Yuanyan was imprisoned again. The Prince of Wei and his wife had no choice but to take action no matter how angry and unwilling they were. Mrs. son was quickly taken out. The 15-year-old boy looked very frail, with a gentle and delicate appearance, but not particularly beautiful. There were obvious bruises and fingerprints on his face, and the corners of his mouth were cracked. He had obviously been slapped, and his clothes were wrinkled and stained a few times. There were blood stains and his hair looked a little messy. As soon as Mrs. saw her son, she couldn't wait to rush forward and hug him tightly in her arms. She was happy and sad at the same time. Lenore, Mom is worried to death. The boy was held by his mother, feeling her worry, and comforted him sensibly. Don't worry, Mom, I'm fine. Xie Jin glanced at the mother and son, and said quietly, everyone who is not interested can leave. Madame 11 will go with me. I still have something to ask you. After saying that, he turned to Zheng Shangshu and said, I will take these 2 people away first. Lord Shangshu has no objection. Of course Zheng Shangshu wanted to object, but as he spoke, he looked into Xie Jin's eyes that seemed to be smiling but made people feel cold. He nodded unconsciously, no. I don't object. So Xie Jin took away Mrs. and her son in a grand manner, and even though King Wei's sinister and murderous eyes almost pierced his back, he remained calm. In the warm pavilion in the Chu family garden. After hearing the news from the guards in green that the wife, mother, and son had been taken away by Xie Jin, Xian Yuanqi, who was sitting at the table drinking tea, smiled lightly, I know, let's go down. Yes. The warm pavilion is quiet and warm, and the atmosphere is warm and relaxing. Chu Hong'ai raised her eyes and looked at Xian Yuanqi. How do you know that Xie Jin will be responsible for investigating this matter? Under the regent's command, your second brother is in charge of finances, Mo Lingan is in charge of intelligence, and Xian Yuanyao is in charge of military power. This young master of the Xie family will become a powerful official in the future and take charge of the court. Xian Yuanqi sipped his tea and said, "We are about to go. The training of a powerful minister naturally requires experience. If the case of the Wei Palace is handed over to others, the person who takes the case will be a little wary. Only Xie Jintian is not afraid of anything and does not take the Wei Palace seriously." Chu Hongyi frowned slightly and said nothing for a while. "And I suspect that Xie Jin is also related to Juxiao Pavilion." Xian Yuanqi smiled lightly, "With the distance between Dazhu and Dongling, if the relationship is not close enough to make people believe it, how can the regent rest assured to let Xie Shaofu? How can your second brother be reused with confidence when your son is in charge?" Chu Hongyi pondered for a moment, so Xie Jin should not be able to find any results in the end. Even if he can find out, he will find a way to hide it. Xian Yuanqi said in a gentle tone, "After all, this incident happened in Qingfeng Pavilion, and your second brother was also involved. Xie Jin is a smart man, and if there is any clue, it can't escape his eyes, not to mention there are so many clues that I can't hide it at all. I just gave it to him to show my sincerity. Xian Yuanyan is cruel and sadistic by nature, but if he is sober, he will never be able to discover Fang Lanyi's identity all night long. A little medicine can make him lose control. When he wakes up completely, all the consequences will happen. It has been caused and cannot be undone." The magical thing about the medicine given by Chu Nanyi was that it would not leave any traces afterwards. Even Xian Yuanyan himself would not notice that he lost control because he was drugged. When Xie Jin takes away Mrs-11 and her son, he will definitely ask her something. The reason why the king of Wei imprisoned Madame 11's son and threatened to take her daughter as a concubine was originally a collaboration with Fang Lanyi, in order to force Madame 11 to poison Chu Hongyi on the night of Xian Yuanqi's wedding. If Madame 11 told these hidden secrets truthfully, Xie Jin would immediately think of who had the most motivation to deal with Fang Lanyi and Xian Yuanyan at this critical juncture. And why Fang Lanyi, a pure and innocent legitimate daughter, appeared in Qingfeng Pavilion, and Xian Yuanyan, who had always only visited Yuxian Tower, also went to Qingfeng Pavilion last night for the first time. This was also a coincidence and a suspicious point. As smart as Xie Jin is, he probably doesn't even need evidence to accurately judge the cause and effect of this matter, as well as the process of the matter step by step. Xian Yuanqi delivered the clues to him. Next, it depends on whether Xie Jin will continue to investigate. If he doesn't continue to investigate, he will directly report these clues to the regent, and Rong Yu and Nan 11 will also know who did it. Xian Yuanyan was stripped of his title of heir, and the title of King of Wei was no longer hereditary, which meant that the Wei Palace would decline after this generation. What capital would Xian Yuanyan have to do whatever he wanted in the future? As for Fang Lanyi, it was just her own fault. Killing two birds with one stone, and severely damaging the Wei Palace and the Zhenqiagong mansion at the same time, the regent would also turn a blind eye. Xian Yuanqi has never been a soft-hearted person. It would be fine if the other party didn't provoke him, but she didn't listen to the repeated warnings and instead had malicious thoughts about Hong Ai. Why keep her? Disasters should have been strangled in the bud. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 402. The gloom in Prince Wei's mansion cannot affect the joy of Prince Jing's mansion. The auspicious day is set on the 16th day of the 12th lunar month. After the appointment, according to the etiquette and customs, the man and woman who are about to get married will no longer meet each other. Chu Hongyi is pregnant, so naturally she can no longer do anything with swords and guns. In the past few days before the wedding, it is rare for her to stay at home and cultivate herself. Madame Chu followed the custom and taught her how to be a female embroidery needle, but when her hands used to holding swords and spears picked up embroidery needles, it was really nondescript. Madame Chu corrected her for a long time, and finally gave up under Chu Hongai's extremely subtle and complicated expression. Prince Jing's mansion was actively preparing for the wedding ceremony. MRS-11 was still a little shocked because of what happened before. After Xiejin asked some questions that day, he let the mother and son go back, and arranged for 2 people to watch secretly. Just in case someone gets angry and vents their anger on them. However, Prince Wei's palace is currently running out of resources. Although Prince Wei is not smart, he is not stupid enough to add another murder case at this time. Princess Jing didn't say anything after she found out about Xian Yuanyan and Fang Lanyi. She just felt that evil people will be punished by evil people. Ever since Fang Lanyi gave birth to the idea of harming the child in Hong Ai's belly, Princess Jing had no idea about the girl in Fang's family. She had a little good impression, but this time she was ruined by Xian Yuanyan, and Princess Jing didn't sympathize with her at all. As for what happened to MRS-11's family, she understood that it was a disaster from heaven. MRS-11's family had suffered an innocent disaster and was frightened for nothing. In the final analysis, it was caused by Prince Jing's palace. Princess Jing ordered someone to pick a child from her family. The prepared 4 treasures of the study were sent over, along with some money. As for the wedding bride, Princess Jing asked the nuns in the palace to find another experienced wife, so the turmoil was over for the time being. Rong Yu stayed in the palace to recover from his injuries. Nan 11 ordered people to move the memorials of important events in the court into the Dajhan Palace. During the days when Rong Yu was recovering from his injuries, they drank medicine every day, chatted, read the memorials together, dealt with important affairs of the court, and lived it's quite fulfilling. The envoys from outside complained repeatedly about Dongling's hospitality and requested to see the queen, but they were all sent back by Xie Xiaofu and Prime Minister Liu. After that, they asked to leave in anger. Prime Minister Liu used him as an official for many years. With all his power and tactics, they gave up the idea of leaving without any effort. Although Sushang and Duanwu were dissatisfied, they had to bow their heads under the eaves and could only swallow their anger for the time being. When Xian Yuanqi and Chu Hongai's engagement was finalized and the news was reported to the palace, Nan 11 didn't react much and only asked Yunyu to pick out a big gift and send it to them on the day of their wedding. After Yunyu agreed, after much thought, she frowned and asked, "What kind of gift should I give to General Chu?" Nan 11 said, "Just give me something ordinary, don't worry too much." Yunyu nodded, "Yes. The things the queen wants to give are naturally of great value, so just give them according to the usual rules of the palace. It doesn't take much thought, which means that you don't have to choose any gifts that hide deep meanings. What you want is to be ordinary, straightforward, and clear. The Shangfang Baowin representing the Holy Will has already been given, so there is no need to worry about anything else." Prince Jing's mansion was busy preparing for the wedding. Xiejin was in charge of investigating the case of Prince Wei's mansion. He was also very busy. He went to the palace every now and then to report clues, but the results were all Qingfeng Pavilion insisted that the girl Xian Yuanyan took away that night was the girl from Qingfeng Pavilion, not the legitimate daughter of the Duke of Zhenqiu. The madam of Qingfeng Pavilion refused to admit that the other girls also bid her to death. The girl who was taken away was King Feng's sister Haitang. They had no idea who Miss Fang was, let alone why Prince Yan of the Wei Palace thought that the person he took away was Miss Fang. The guests who appeared at Qingfeng Pavilion that night had never seen Fang Lanyi, and confirmed that it was indeed Miss Haitang who was taken away. However, Miss Haitang was covered with a veil at the time, and they could not see her face clearly. When the madam of Qingfeng Pavilion and the girls were interrogated, Zheng Shangshu and Xiejin were present together with the 2 ministers of the Ministry of Punishment. The interrogation process was not hidden from anyone, so now more people believe that this matter is just one-sided words of Xianyu and Yan. How Fang Lanyi arrived at Prince Wei's mansion remains to be ascertained. Qingfeng Pavilion? Who doesn't know that Prince Yan's favorite place to go is Jade Immortal Pavilion? Why did he suddenly go to Qingfeng Pavilion that night? This is unreasonable, and the excuse is too lame. Yes, maybe it was just a private tryst between the two of them. Unexpectedly, the thunder from the sky stirred up the fire on the earth, and it was out of control, which made it a big mistake. Prince Yan caused a lot of trouble to Miss Fang, so he had to find an excuse. So I have to turn my attention to the girl from Qingfeng Pavilion. Perhaps only Prince Yan and Miss Fang know the truth. But no matter what, they are now a couple, so don't worry about others. Maybe this is just a little fun between husband and wife. Who says it's not? Even before Xianyu and Yan was released from prison, there were countless rumors outside. Although the powerful families sounded like they were noble families, not everyone could bear the word noble. There were endless gossips and rumors. It became more and more uproar, gradually fermented, and became more and more unpleasant. There were various versions of speculation. When it reached the ears of King Wei and his wife, they were so angry that they almost wanted to kill all the people outside who were talking nonsense. But today's Prince Wei's mansion is no longer the one that once stomped its feet and shocked the imperial capital. However, no matter what the rumors are, the case should be investigated impartially. After the case is reported to the Queen naturally cannot make random guesses like those outside. The regent was only concerned about the progress of the case. After a series of inquiries, Minister Zheng was trembling and could not answer, with cold sweat on his forehead. Xiejin did make a suggestion: if you want to know whether the Madam of Qingfeng Pavilion and the girls lied, you need to arrest them all and interrogate them. Under severe torture, they will confess. Yes, 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 I think so too. After listening to Xiejin's words, Minister Zheng nodded repeatedly in agreement. If Prince Yan did not lie, then the Madam of Qingfeng Pavilion must have lied. These people are very cunning and will not cry until they see the coffin dash. So you are asking you to investigate the case, and you plan to torture them into confessing? Rong Yu's eyebrows were cold and his voice was indifferent. If the Madam of Qingfeng Pavilion is innocent, how will you compensate her after torturing her? Minister Zheng was startled and was speechless. Xiejin bowed his head. It's my fault for not thinking it through. Minister Zheng was suspicious. The ninth master of the Xie family had always been arrogant. Few people in the entire imperial capital dared to provoke him. Although the regent was the monarch, Xiejin's attitude was so respectful that it seemed unreal. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 403. It was the sentence just now: if you want to know whether the Madam of Qingfeng Pavilion and the girls lied, you need to arrest them all and interrogate them. Under torture, they will confess. It was more in line with his usual style. Rong Yu said in a cold tone, you still have 10 days. If you can't find the truth, you will all be dismissed and investigated. Minister Zheng's face changed when he heard this. Dismissal and investigation? Just for such a case, the regent actually took real action? But even if he took real action, he, the minister, was dismissed. What position would Xiejin, the boy of the Xie family, be dismissed from? Dismiss him as the young master of the Xie family who assisted in the investigation? You can't stop him from being the son of Prime Minister Xie. Minister Zheng felt it was unfair. But facing the cold and intimidating aura of the regent, he was too afraid to speak out even if he had many dissatisfactions in his heart. He could only agree to it. Xiejin was calm. After leaving the imperial study, he walked out of the palace leisurely. When Minister Zheng asked him how to investigate next, he just smiled faintly. The main person in charge of this case is Mr. Zheng. I am just an assistant. Please don't misunderstand me, Mr. Shangshu, and don't put your hopes on me. Minister Zheng choked and almost couldn't help blurting out, when you took Madame 11 and her son away that day, you didn't say that I was responsible for this matter. But what's the use of saying this now? The ninth master of the Xie family has always been self-willed and unscrupulous. He has the support of Prime Minister Xie, who loves his son like his life. Even Minister Zheng dare not offend him. Xie Jin was tired of investigating the case these 2 days. After all, it was very brain-consuming to find a way to destroy the evidence while investigating. He felt that in addition to going to Xian Yuanqi's wedding banquet to ask for a glass of wedding wine, he had to take the opportunity to blackmail him and make Xian Yuanqi bleed. As for what to blackmail, he hasn't thought about it yet. After leaving the palace and returning home, Xie Jin went straight back to his own Jin garden. His beloved mother had been in love with the eldest princess recently and often visited the eldest princess's mansion. Since she was not at home, he did not need to go to pay respects. As soon as he stepped into the courtyard, he saw the young man in an ice blue robe, Wei Wushuan, the eldest prince of Yan state, who was presented to Dongling in the name of Beijiang. At this time, the young man was standing quietly in the corridor, silently looking at the distant sky, and his beautiful eyes like glass seemed to contain thousands of thoughts. It was so beautiful that it was breathtaking. Xie Jin leaned against the courtyard gate and casually admired the beauty and scenery for a while. He sincerely felt that in terms of appearance alone, this young man was indeed beautiful beyond description. The ice blue robe dragged on the ground. He was so thin in such a cold winter, and he was not shivering with cold. It can be seen that his heart was not as weak as his appearance showed. A beautiful face that was as beautiful as the work of nature, it was really a darling carefully created by God. However, Xie Jin thought of some things about Yan state, and secretly thought that with such an identity and such a face that could bring disaster, he didn't know whether it was a blessing or a curse. With a cold and playful arc at the corner of his lips, Xie Jin walked into the courtyard. His footsteps were originally silent, but he inevitably made a little sound when he stepped on the fallen leaves in winter. The young man in the corridor was startled and came back to his senses. He turned around and saw Xie Jin coming back. He turned around and greeted him hurriedly. As he walked, his ice blue light robe shed layers of snow-like brilliance under the sunlight. It was really beautiful and luxurious. Before he came to Xie Jin, the young man knelt down, put his hands on the ground, touched his forehead on the back of his hands, and said respectfully, "Young master." Xie Jin stopped and looked down at his respectful and almost humble posture and etiquette. Beauty is in the bones, not in the skin. The young man in front of him was almost impeccable in every way, and his every move was elegant. Even in his humble posture on the ground, he looked more elegant, and his charm was revealed silently. Xie Jin found it interesting. The Yan kingdom's royal family had such a beauty. Was it a blessing from heaven and earth? However, as the eldest prince of Yan kingdom, his mother was of humble status, just a dancer to please others. Although the child born after being favored by the king had the title of eldest son, he was just as humble as his mother, so humble that no one regarded him as the eldest prince. This was the reason why Beijiang could present him as a gift. Yan kingdom was dependent on Beijiang. The eldest prince of Yan kingdom, who had no status at all, was also an object to please others for Beijiang Crown Prince Duan Muyu. If he could really marry Dongling smoothly, he would be the prince of Yan kingdom. If not, then this person was just a beautiful plaything in the eyes of the Beijiang dignitaries and even the Yan kingdom royal family. Unfortunately, the marriage was not successful, and he didn't even have the chance to become a beautiful vase in the harem of Her Majesty the Queen. I remember telling you to stay in Wushuan Pavilion and not to step out of the room without my permission, Xie Jin said lazily. You turned a deaf ear to my words. Wushuan dare not. The young man lowered his body. Wushuan has something to report, please allow me, master. On the first day Xiejin brought them back, he set rules for these young men who were given to him. Your master presented you to His Majesty Dongling, and you are Dongling's people. Her Majesty the Queen gave you to me, and you are Juyu's people from now on. You must be polite when you see your master in the future, and don't bring your family's rules here. Call me master when you meet, don't call yourself a slave, Juyu doesn't like that. There are many side rooms in Jinyuan, each of you choose one to live in, away from my house, I like quiet. Just name the side rooms with your own names, it's easy to remember. Observe the rules of Jinyuan. Juye looks easy to talk to, but he has a bad temper. If anyone dares to break the rules and anger Juye, I will let you taste the taste of skinning and pulling out tendons. Have you heard of the beautiful woman's bones being used to make a pipa? Don't give Juye this opportunity. So the young men have been really well behaved in the past few days. I don't know if they are afraid of these threats and warnings. Anyway, Xiejin is happy to have peace of mind. If he hadn't seen this unparalleled young man standing in the corridor today, he would have almost forgotten that there were still a few beautiful boys in his Jinyuan who had not been dealt with. Do you have something to ask for? Xiejin raised his eyebrows slightly, and his pair of charming Danfan eyes were full of laziness and coldness. Tell me. As he said, he walked straight into his room. The young man behind him stood up and followed him. He walked into the house with his head lowered and eyes downcast. He knelt down again and spoke in a low voice, still respectfully and humbly, Wushuan is poisoned by a goo poison. It will occur 3 days a month. I am afraid that the noise at night will disturb your rest. I come to ask you to allow Wushuan to spend the night in the back garden tonight. Xiejin leaned lazily on the brocade couch. The beautiful maid poured tea for him. He raised his eyes, poison. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbspeed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 404. Yes. Xiejin took a sip of tea and said in a light voice, who planted the poison in you? Yanguo Guo Shi. Xiejin raised his lips, what kind of poison? Mother-son poison, Wei Wushuan said calmly, the mother poison is in my mother's body. Xiejin raised his eyebrows, a small country has actually fallen to the point of controlling its son in this way. Wei Wushuan's mother is the king's woman after all. The national master must have planted the poison on them, mother and son, at the king's instruction or with the king's permission. Otherwise, is this national master going to rebel? Xiejin sneered, his eyes fell on the young man's face, and he casually hooked his fingers, as if calling a kitten or a puppy, come to me. Wei Wushuan lowered his eyebrows and was silent for a moment, then stood up and walked to Xiejin and knelt down, his posture extremely docile. It's not easy to raise a goo. You must be very useful, otherwise they wouldn't have bothered with this. Xiejin smiled faintly, his eyes were sharp, the Yan state master planted a mother-child goo in you, and Duanmu Yu sent you all the way to Dongling. The tip of the black deerskin boots lifted the boy's chin, and Xiejin's voice was a bit bewitching, baby, tell me, what did they ask you to do in Dongling? Wei Wushuan raised his eyes, and his beautiful eyes like glass met the smiling eyes of the 9th master of the Xie family. He was stunned and seemed to be absent-minded for a while. Young master. Tell me, what did they ask you to do? Use beauty as a weapon. Before the boy finished speaking, a strand of blood suddenly flowed from the corner of his mouth, his eyes went black, and the whole person fell over without warning. Xiejin silently looked at the boy who was lying on the ground, raised the corner of his lips slightly, and said, it's really an old trick. Putting down the teacup, he stood up and slowly straightened his robe, and glanced at the boy who fainted on the ground. "Someone come." A black-clothed figure flashed into the room outside the door, leaned down and knelt down. "Master. Take him back to his own room." Siejin's voice was lazy and slightly cold. "Master is an eyesore." "Yes." The black-clothed shadow guard bowed his head and asked, "Should we call a doctor for him?" "What doctor?" Siejin glanced at the boy who fell to the ground. "He won't die." "Yes." Siejin said nothing more and walked out. "What have those people in the family done recently?" He started chatting. "Didn't you say you bribed the assassin? Why haven't I seen the assassin come to me?" The black-clothed shadow guard behind him replied, "The assassin hired by the eldest son took the business and then turned it down." "Turn it down?" Siejin raised his eyebrows slightly. "Why did you turn it down? Did you think the money was too little?" "No," the shadow guard replied, "because I was afraid of death. I didn't dare to take it." Siejin was silent for a moment, and the corners of his lips raised a mocking arc. "Coward." "But recently, Miss Seven has been getting closer to Miss Chio from Prince Jing's mansion," the shadow guard reported. "Miss Seven took the initiative to approach Miss Chio with the instruction of the eldest son." "Purpose?" "It hasn't been revealed yet." Siejin didn't speak, his expression was playful. After standing alone in the courtyard for a while, he tilted his head and looked in a certain direction. "What is Master Chen doing?" "Reading," shadow guard said. "Master Chen's health has almost recovered in the past 2 days. He stays in his room most of the time reading and rarely goes out." "Let him come over." "Yes. It is really a turbulent time right now. The Queen's coronation ceremony, the regent was injured, envoys from other countries came to see the emperor, Xian Yuanqi was going to get married, and there were those messy things in the Prince of Wei's mansion. One thing after another, the real peace and tranquility may have to wait until the end of the new year." After a while, footsteps were heard. The young man in plain white clothes followed the shadow guard and came to the courtyard. He bowed respectfully to Siejin. "Akin greets Master Ju." "No need to be polite." Siejin looked at his complexion. The young man's eyebrows were gentle and elegant, and it was pleasing to the eye. "You have been well taken care of these 2 days. You look more energetic than before." "Thank you, Master Ju." "No need to thank me. If you want to thank someone, thank Her Majesty the Queen and the Regent." Siejin turned and walked out of Jing Garden. "Come with me." Xian Yuanchen was surprised. Questions emerged in his mind, but he said nothing and just followed Siejin quietly. Since he entered the Xie mansion, he understood the temper of Master Ju Xie better than before. He said what he meant and didn't like others to disobey him. As long as he did everything according to his will, he would not make things difficult for people without reason. He seemed to be very easy to get along with. Even for some of his occasional requests that were not too excessive, he could readily agree to them. But if anyone displeased this ancestor, the end would usually not be very good. Xian Yuanchen had seen it with his own eyes. On the 3rd day of his visit to Xie's house, after the doctor applied medicine to his wounds, he politely sent the doctor out and walked outside Jinyuan Garden. He happened to meet Xie Ming, the uneducated second son of the Xie family. The other party thought that Siejin was not at home, and said some sarcastic and mocking words to Xian Yuanchen, but Siejin happened to hear it. Xian Yuanchen clearly remembered Xie Ming's pale face at that time. When he saw Siejin, he looked as scared as if he saw a demon. Siejin smiled like a spring breeze. "Second brother, this mouth really needs a lesson." Xian Yuanchen had never known how terrible a person could be when he said this with a smile, but he saw it that day. The second son of the Xie family slapped his own mouth in front of so many servants. While doing so, he apologized, saying that he had a bad mouth and deserved to be beaten. After 10 slaps, the corners of his mouth were cracked, his cheeks were swollen, and he no longer looked arrogant and domineering. However, Siejin didn't ask him to stop, but Xie Ming didn't dare to stop, and kept beating until he stood aside. Xian Yuanchen had the illusion that his cheeks were throbbing in pain, but he didn't even dare to ask for mercy. He didn't know whether Xiejin vented his anger on his behalf, or simply wanted to teach Xieming a lesson for the rude words, or whether he deliberately wanted Xian Yuanchen to know what a cruel and ruthless person he was. No one is not afraid of him. Although he is also ruthless, Xiejin's ruthlessness is different from Xian Yuanyan's cruelty. If someone doesn't get into his hands, he has no interest in taking the initiative to find trouble for anyone. But if he commits suicide and gets into his hands, then I can only wish for good luck and pray that Master Ju will be in a good mood that day. What are you thinking about? After stepping out of the gate of the Xie family's residence, Xiejin turned his head and glanced at Xian Yuanchen. Have you been worried about something recently? Xian Yuanchen came back to his senses and slowly shook his head. No. If you have any concerns, you can tell me directly. I have no grievances with you and will not embarrass you, Xiejin said. You don't have to be too nervous. I really have nothing to worry about. Thank you, Master Ju, for your concern. Xian Yuanchen smiled warmly. Aiken doesn't think about anything else except worrying about his mother. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 405. Xiejin hummed, I can go back and see your mother when I have time some other time. Thank you, Master Ju. Xiejin didn't say anything more and took Xian Yuanchen to Prince Jing's mansion. Prince Jing and his wife have been busy arranging their son's marriage these 2 days, and everyone in the palace is busy. When he heard Xiejin's request to see him, Prince Jing was really surprised. Xiez Xiaju. The butler nodded, yes. Looking for the crown prince? No, the housekeeper shook his head. The 9th young master is here to see the 2nd young master. Prince Jing was a little surprised, but not that surprised. He thought for a moment and then ordered, take Xieju directly to Hua's yard. Yes. Prince Jing was of the same generation as Mr. Xie, and Xiejin, a junior, paid a temporary visit. According to etiquette, he should first pay homage to Prince Jing, the master of the palace. However, Prince Jing's own speech was equivalent to skipping the etiquette and saving Xiejin's time and energy in making detours. Xian Yuanhua has been staying in the house reading for the past 2 days and has never gone out. Everyone in the palace is busy with his eldest brother's marriage. He can't help much, so he can only try not to go out and cause trouble. At this age, he is still too early to get married, and he is at the age when he is about to take the exams for academic achievements. However, as a concubine, he cannot control many things. He can neither go out as he pleases like the legitimate son, nor can he openly participate in the games between the children of the aristocratic family. During the various banquets, I had nothing to do on weekdays and could only read books to pass the time. Most of the time, I was buried in books and dealing with knowledge articles. Of course, for Xian Yuanhua, he is actually satisfied with his current lifestyle. Although obtaining fame has always been his wish, the temperament of the former emperor's grandson makes him shy away from an official career. He cannot imagine such a violent and capricious person. What would Dongling become if he really became the emperor? He did not have the courage to serve such a king, so he never expressed his thoughts. Now that Her Majesty the Queen has ascended the throne, because this year's entrance examination time has passed, he needs to wait until next year, when the new emperor ascends the throne. As a rule, an additional imperial examination will be added to select young upstarts to enter the court. For students all over the world, this is an extra opportunity and is extremely rare. Because scientific examinations are usually held every 3 years. Xian Yuanhua was thinking about what Her Majesty the Queen had said about letting him and a Chen go to the palace together as chamberlains, so he acted more low-key and quiet, for fear of causing some trouble at this juncture. If he can successfully practice with the regent for a year and get the approval of the regent and Her Majesty the Queen, next autumn, he can use this qualification to obtain the consent of his father and brother to participate in the next autumn. Only by relying on the scientific examination to become an official can he prove his talent and knowledge. Let him become an official in a dignified manner, be loyal to the king, and contribute his meager contribution to the dongling community and the people of the world. Second young master. The butler came in and reported, "The ninth master of the Xie family is here to visit." Xian Yuanhua was sitting in front of the desk by the window reading a book. Hearing this, he was stunned for a moment, and then confirmed, "Thank you, ninth young master." The butler nodded, "Yes, second young master." "Ninth young master has something to do with me." Xian Yuanhua was puzzled, and then he realized something and quickly stood up and said, "Let ninth young master come in first. Come here. Serve tea." "Brother Ahua, don't be too nervous." Xiejin walked over the threshold, tall, calm and leisurely. "I came here just to see you and find out some things." Xian Yuanhua was about to ask what was going on, but he caught a glimpse of a young man following Xiejin, and was suddenly surprised. "Ah Chen." Xian Yuanchen smiled gently, "I haven't had time to thank you yet." Xian Yuanhua was puzzled and was about to ask thank you for what when he suddenly realized what he was saying and raised a gentle smile on his lips. "No need to thank me, I didn't do anything. You should be more grateful to Master Ju." The best he could do was to tell the queen the truth of the matter in a few words, with a glimmer of hope that he could seek help from someone who could help her. The queen is willing to show kindness, and Xieju brought Xian Yuanchen out from the wolf den in Prince Wei's mansion. They are the ones who really deserve to be thanked. Xiejin entered the house and took a look at Xian Yuanhua's residence. It was clean and tidy, and the house was pretty good. It was much better than Xian Yuanchen's previous residence in Prince Wei's mansion. Hearing the conversation between the two, he turned his head and glanced at Xian Yuanhua, and said calmly, "Why do you thank me? I am also following orders." As he spoke, he sat down on the chair in front of the desk and flipped through a few books on the desk. "Have you been reading lately?" Xian Yuanhua nodded, "It's always good to read more books." "Follow me to the palace later to see the regent." Xiejin leaned back in his chair and said in a calm voice, "Before entering the palace, I would like to remind you two of some rules." When the two young men heard the words, their expressions were slightly stern, like students who had made mistakes standing in front of the master, obediently and respectfully listening to the instructions. Because they are both concubines, they have always been cautious in their actions and speech. Although Xiejin is not their father and brother, he is the legitimate son of the chief minister, and he is kind to Xian Yuanchen. Thirdly, his behavior has always been very scary. Therefore, Xian Yuanhua and Xian Yuanchen, two 17-year-old boys, really didn't dare to act arrogantly in front of Xiejin. "Don't be nervous." Xiejin raised his lips and smiled, "I also have good intentions. I want to give you a few words to prevent you from violating the regent's taboo after entering the palace." "Yes." Xian Yuanhua lowered his eyes, "Akin and I will definitely remember Master Ju's words." Xiejin clicked his tongue. His original intention was to let them relax, but why did these two people become more and more reserved like elm trees? Is he so scary? Xiejin touched his face. This face should be okay, it won't make the child cry, let alone scare the two teenagers in front of him. Forget it. These are not important. First of all, remember the most important point. No matter when, don't make Her Majesty the Queen unhappy. Xiejin said calmly, "If you have different opinions on government affairs, you can speak up in front of the regent. It doesn't matter whether you make a reasonable or unreasonable suggestion, but if the regent thinks that you have offended the queen, the consequences should not be something you can afford." The two teenagers listened carefully and nodded at the right time. Don't pay attention to the advice of the officials advising the empress to choose a husband. Don't be smart and talk nonsense, otherwise the consequences will be the same. The two continued to nod, yes. Xiejin chuckled, his body relaxed a little, and his voice sounded casual. When you work with the regent, the only thing you need to listen to is the will of the empress and the regent. Don't have any close contact with any ministers when you are not yet fully grown. Do more, keep your mouth shut, and learn to be silent when necessary. No matter what happened in the imperial study or the Taisho palace, it was the time when it happened. Don't mention it to anyone after leaving that place. Remember, this is a taboo, for the sake of your lives. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 406. The two nodded. Although the regent has a cold temperament, he usually doesn't deliberately find fault with anyone. On the contrary, as long as you two have talents and learning ability, the regent will focus on training and reusing them. Xiejin said, the regent is a person who cherishes talents. You have to cherish this rare opportunity. Xianyuan Hua and Xianyuan Chen nodded quietly, acting very well behaved and obedient. Thank you, Mr. Zhu, for the tip. Xianyuan Hua's voice was gentle. Akin and I must be careful in our words and deeds. We don't seek merit, but we seek no faults. You don't have to have such a mentality. You still have to make meritorious deeds. Being a student is only temporary and cannot last long. I won't treat you badly, but if I do something I shouldn't do. He smiled faintly. The regent is a person who can even depose the emperor, let alone deal with some small shrimps and fish. The two young men were awe-inspiring and kept Xiejin's words in mind. To sum it up, there is nothing more than one sentence: be loyal to your majesty, do your duty, and do not exceed your status. It sounds simple, but in fact many people often fail to grasp the word property and lose their sense of proportion, which leads to eventual death. One more thing. Xiejin tapped the back of the chair with one hand and said in a calm tone, I want to meet your little sister. Is she at home now? Xianyuan Hua was a little surprised. My little sister is at home, Master Zhu has something to do with her. I have a question to ask her, Xiejin said in a casual tone, but since men and women are not intimate, it seems inappropriate for me to meet her rashly. What do you think we should do? This. Xianyuan Hua pondered for a moment. Shall I ask mother for instructions? Xianyuan Jia is a young girl who is about to leave the palace. According to the rules, she should not meet casually with foreign men. Especially after what happened in Prince Wei's palace, the etiquette and rules of the boudoir for noble ladies from major aristocratic families have become tighter. If the princess were to know that Xianyuan Jia had a private meeting with a foreign man, it would be difficult to explain the matter. No need. Xiejin looked relaxed. Go and ask her why the seventh girl from the Xie family came to her recently, and then come back and tell me the answer. The seventh girl of the Xie family. Xuanyuan Hua felt strange that the seventh girl of the Xie family had been out of the court for several years and was several years older than Jia. The two of them seemed to have little contact. But since Xiejin said that, there must be a reason. He nodded and quickly turned around and walked out. Xiejin turned to look out the window. His eyebrows were delicate and handsome, with a natural noble demeanor. The royal family, the powerful and aristocratic families are all doing their own affairs, and most of them put their own interests first. It's rare to have brothers who support each other like you. A faint voice sounded, with a bit of calmness. In life, wealth is easy to come by, but a confidant is hard to find. Since we can now support each other and cherish this precious relationship in the future, don't lose your heart and forget your original intention. When Xianyuan Chen heard what he said, his heart couldn't help but throb. The more I get to know the ninth master of the Xie family, the more I feel that he is completely different from the son of the chief minister that the world knows. A young man of 18 or 19 years old, I originally thought that he was just a more noble status, good-looking, more ruthless in his methods, and in his behavior. He is fearless and dares to do things that others dare not do, but courage is something that is originally given by status. Do you think any son of a minister dares to act recklessly in the powerful prince's palace? Which concubine and concubine would dare to be disrespectful in front of the favored mistress' legitimate son? Which civilian dares to act unscrupulously in front of an official? The status of the chief minister's legitimate son can make people wantonly arrogant. But Xian Yuanchen later discovered that Xie Jin's aloofness and confidence did not entirely stem from his identity. Of course, identity is still the biggest reliance. But he is completely different from those arrogant young masters. He is far more transparent, more free and easy, far-sighted, and calm than the young master of this age. His superficial cynicism cannot hide his strong and steady nature, and his aura that makes people surrender and fear unconsciously. Xian Yuanyan is also the legitimate son of a noble family, but Xian Yuanchen has lived in the Wei Palace for so many years, but he has never felt the momentum and pride in Xian Yuanyan. What Xian Yuanyan showed him was bullying others with power and tyrannical and unethical, completely cold-blooded selfishness and narrow-mindedness that uses status to oppress others. However, one day when he himself becomes the suppressed person, not only will he be completely defeated, but even his self-esteem and face will be shattered, leaving only embarrassment and cowardice without the power to fight back. Thank you, Master Ju, for your advice. A faint smile appeared at the corner of the young man's mouth, and he sincerely thanked this person for what he said today. Akin will remember Master Ju's words, do what he can, be loyal to the Lord, and maintain his integrity. The original intention remains unchanged, and we are not tempted by worldly interests. We do not seek wealth and honor in this life, but only seek to be upright and open-minded. Xie Jin didn't say anything, just leaned on his chair quietly and closed his eyes to fall asleep. About an incense stick later, Xian Yuanhua came back, stepped through the threshold, and walked up to Xie Jin, with a somewhat hesitant expression on his face. My little sister said that the seventh girl was asking her if the regent still has any servants around him. Xie Jin opened his eyes, a little surprised, and then raised the corners of his mouth, reading. Yes, Swan Yuan, whose tone was a little subtle. Jia said that the seventh girl was testing her tone and wanted to know if she had a good relationship with Her Majesty the Queen and if she could speak in front of Her Majesty. Because Akin and I were singled out. Reading for the regent, she thought that the regent wanted to train a bastard from a noble family. A concubine from an aristocratic family. Xie Jin raised his eyebrows and instantly understood his elder brother's plan. How dare he think that the regent specially cultivates bastards to suppress the heads and legitimate sons of major aristocratic families? How did this brain grow to come up with such weird ideas? A mocking arc appeared on the corner of Xie Jin's lips, and he couldn't help but shake his head. Fortunately, he thought this man had some scheming plans, but he didn't expect, Tisk, he really looked down upon him. But Jia said that she wasn't very familiar with the seventh girl. She just met her at a ladies' flower viewing party before. The seventh girl took the initiative to come over and talk to her, and they chatted for a few words. Xian Yuanhua was afraid that Xie Jin would misunderstand. Explained cautiously, Jia is smart and sensible, and generally doesn't talk nonsense. She always knows what to say and what not to say in front of unfamiliar people. Please rest assured, Master Ju. Okay, I have nothing to worry about. Xie Jin stood up, turned around and walked out. Let's go, I will take you into the palace to do business. From now on, you will be obedient and do things. There are many rules in the palace. If you are disobedient, you will be beaten. Don't blame me for not warning you beforehand. The two teenagers looked at each other in silence, and unanimously felt that although Xie Jin's words were a warning, they sounded particularly kind. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article feed, placement, below article feed, target. Type, mix. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 407. When Xiejin brought the two young men into the palace, Rong Yu had already dealt with today's memorials and was discussing military affairs with Xianyu and Yao. After the new year and the beginning of spring, Ling Fan will return to the Great Zhou. The 5,000 Suanjia soldiers he brought this time will stay and join your 5,000 Heiyao troops. After the reorganization, you will be fully responsible for commanding the training. Rong Yu sat in front of the table, lowering his eyes to look at a map unfolded on the table. Although the combat effectiveness of these 10,000 elite soldiers is stronger than ordinary soldiers, it is not strong enough. The king will give you 2 years. You must be proficient in weapons, cavalry, and archery. The king wants them to truly be able to fight 10 with 1 and 100 with 10, and become the king's army. Xianyu Enyao was silent for a moment. Silent, he glanced at his master silently. 2 years. What? Rong Yu raised his eyes and said indifferently, too much. Xianyu Enyao frowned. It's not too much time, but does the master think too highly of me? Both the Suanjia army and the Obsidian army are very strong, but the Suanjia army has always been stronger than the Obsidian army, just like the master has always suppressed me to death. Speaking of this, he really wanted to wipe away a bitter tear for his tragic life experience of being beaten to pieces in those years. But to be honest, Rong Yu's strength is indeed much stronger than his, although he has always suspected that Rong Yu had secretly eaten the legendary panacea and opened up the so-called Ren and Du meridians. Otherwise, why was he so strong at such a young age that people thought he was not a human? But it took him 5 years to recognize the facts and accept his fate. The Suanjia army has been led by Rong Yu for so many years, and its combat effectiveness is already recognized by the world as unmatched. He really doesn't know how to improve their combat capabilities. 1 is worth 10, 10 is worth 100. It sounds simple, but when this sentence comes out of Rong Yu's mouth, it is by no means a simple description. Instead, it requires everyone to be all-round. In single soldier combat, personal strength must be strong. Swords, spears, and horseback archery must all be the best of the best and the strongest of the strong. Not to mention the deployment of troops. On the battlefield, not only does the commander need to command and dispatch, but also the military strategy must be extraordinary. Soldiers must absolutely obey military orders, be brave and fierce, and cooperate seamlessly to develop a tacit understanding with their comrades. Although there are only 10,000 elite soldiers, the training requirements are higher and more difficult than that of 100,000 soldiers. Xianyu Enyao's confidence was shattered by Rong Yu when he was 13 years old. Although he learned a lot from Rong Yu in those 5 years, so he didn't think he was incompetent, he was not so conceited that he thought he could meet Rong Yu's standards. That was hell-level difficulty. Because he knew him too well, he knew that it was almost impossible for him to meet his requirements. Besides, it would take time for the Black Obsidian Army and the Black Armor Army to run in. The hall was silent for a moment. Rong Yu's slender fingertips tapped the rosewood desk, and his voice was so light that no emotion could be heard. So you think you can't do it? Xianyu Enyao's scalp numbed, and the blood in his body immediately felt stagnant. That's not what I meant. He hesitated for a moment, not wanting to admit that he was incompetent, but it is indeed a bit difficult. Rong Yu didn't say anything else. The air in the hall seemed to condense little by little, and it was so quiet that you could hear a pin drop. Xianyu Enyao couldn't help but turn pale. He was afraid of Rong Yu, a deep-rooted fear. It was okay when he didn't do anything wrong on weekdays, but once he was in a weak position psychologically, the fear came with overwhelming pressure, which made him a little unbearable. The hand hanging by his side unconsciously clenched a little, and he almost couldn't help kneeling down to apologize, but he heard Rong Yu said calmly, "If the king lists a training plan for you, Can you do it? What? Xian Yuanyao suddenly raised his head. Master. I will list the daily training plan for you, and I will give you the power to organize the training of the Suanjia army. Rong Yu raised his eyes and looked at him calmly. You can train according to the plan and method formulated by me, or you can arrange it according to your own ideas. I will not interfere, I will only look at the results. Xian Yuanyao was refreshed, and looked at Rong Yu in disbelief, with obvious shock and surprise in his eyes. In this case, why doesn't the master do it himself? I don't have time. Xian Yuanyao was speechless. Okay, he understands that the master will be busy with government affairs in the future, and any free time will definitely be used to cultivate feelings with His Majesty. He is reluctant to leave His Majesty's side and wants to be affectionate with His Majesty, like inseparable conjoined twins, but this is not the reason for him to completely delegate military power. Every general who leads troops in battle has his own different way of training soldiers and horses, which is also the gap between generals and generals on the battlefield and the key to success or failure, which is his biggest trump card. Especially the 10,000-man army of the king. Since Rong Yu said it was the army of the king, it can be imagined that Rong Yu has planned to carefully build this elite army of the king. In the future, whether it is the investment of time and energy, or the equipment of soldiers and armor, it will be a unique preferential treatment. Well equipped, rigorously trained, and carefully built, it will definitely have a stronger combat effectiveness than the Suanjia army of the Great Zhou in the future. But if such an elite cavalry is trained by Xian Yuanyao, it is almost equivalent to the ownership of this army completely belonging to Xian Yuanyao. During the training and combat process, the commander and his comrades will have a special feeling of recognition and awe. Any other commander who wants to take over will be as difficult as ascending to heaven. Xian Yuanyao doesn't believe that Rong Yu is not aware of this, but he still decided so. Is it because of trust? Xian Yuanyao pursed his lips, and his heart was shaken one after another. However, before he had time to fully feel this indescribable emotion, he heard Rong Yu's voice that was so cold that it almost corroded your bones again. If it still doesn't work, I think you should probably go back to the furnace and be retrained. Xian Yuanyao was shocked, and all the emotion disappeared immediately. He hurriedly said, I can do it. Master, don't worry, I can do it. Did he dare to say no? Not to mention the plan and method formulated by Rong Yu, even if it was just a verbal tip or two, it would be of great help to him. He was not incompetent, but a strong army needs a strong general. The reason why he had no confidence was not because he doubted his ability, but because he was worried that the final result would not meet Rong Yu's requirements, so he did not dare to have absolute confidence. Rong Yu was willing to help him to this extent. If he still dared to say no, I'm afraid that the master would really let him go through the hellish training he had experienced that year again. Your Highness, Prince Regent. At this moment, the guard's respectful voice sounded at the palace gate. Master Xie brought the two young masters from Prince Jing's mansion and Prince Wei's mansion to see you. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 408. Rong Yu said calmly, let them in. Yes. After a while, Xiejin came in with two young men. After saluting, Xiejin said, these two people are the tutors appointed by Her Majesty the Queen to the Master. Xian Yuan Hua and Xian Yuan Chen bowed respectfully, looking down at the palace brick floor. The cold floor tiles soaked their knees. The deep chill made them clearly realize that the place they were in at this moment would no longer be the small courtyard far away from the center of power in the palace. Xian Yuanyao turned his eyes slightly, glanced at the two young men without emotion, and then his eyes fell on Xiejin's peach-like face. He seemed to want to say something, but he swallowed it back when the words came to his lips. What? Xiejin keenly noticed that he was about to say something, and couldn't help but raise his eyebrows and asked in lip language, was he scolded by the master? Xian Yuanyao shook his head slowly. Although he was suffocated by the pressure just now, The master did not scold him. Rong Yu was not the type to scold people with words. Just keeping silent could create a strong pressure that made people feel cold. If it was really a scolding, it would not be so scary. But Xian Yuanyao did not want to say this. He wanted to ask why Xiejin was so special to these two teenagers and brought them to the palace in person, but when he thought about being punished to kneel down for talking nonsense the day before yesterday, he immediately learned his lesson and did not dare to joke with Xiejin in front of Rong Yu. Xiejin seemed to see what he was thinking, smiled nonchalantly, and quickly looked away. Does the Lord want to hear the true story of the case in the Prince of Wei's mansion? Rong Yu's eyes fell on the map, as if he was thinking about something, and he said calmly, "Speak." The key to this matter lies in Madame 11 and the fact that Prince Jing's mansion is praying for the marriage of the prince. I have asked Madame 11 before. The Prince of Wei sent someone to take her 15-year-old son and threatened to take Madame 11's 12-year-old daughter into the palace and give her to Xian Yuanyan as a concubine. Xiejin stood in front of the desk and said in a faint voice, Madame 11 didn't know at first how she had offended the Prince of Wei's mansion for no reason, but her son suffered in the Prince of Wei's mansion and her daughter was young. The words of the Prince of Wei made her confused and at a loss. That night, Fang Lanyi went to Madame 11's house and said that she could save Madame 11. The couple's children, but the condition is that on the night of Prince Chi's wedding, Madame 11 will use her status as a matchmaker to put musk in the bridal chamber when making the bed, so as to harm Chu Hongai's baby. Madame 11 is a matchmaker for others. She is a well-known kind-hearted woman. She has never done anything harmful in her life, so Fang Lanyi's words are like bad news to her. She was almost scared to death. Before she came back to her senses, Fang Lanyi and Xian Yuanyan had this incident that night. Xiejin recounted the incident slowly and did not mention anything else. At the end, he said calmly, although Madame 11 has a motive for committing a crime, she does not have the ability to commit a crime. A commoner cannot have the courage to retaliate against the Prince of Wei's mansion and the Duke of Zhenqiu's mansion. Moreover, I have also checked and Madame 11's family has been ruled out of suspicion. The last sentence is obviously nonsense. Of course, Madame 11 could not be the mastermind behind the scenes. Not to mention Madame 11, even if it is placed in an ordinary powerful family, it is difficult to achieve such a perfect revenge method. However, on the surface, the procedures still need to be followed. Fang Lanyi is really vicious, Xian Yuanyao muttered, she is a perfect match for Xian Yuanyan. Xiejin glanced at him, smiled faintly, and looked at Rong Yu. How does the master plan to deal with this matter? In fact, this matter has been tacitly understood. Even if Rong Yu didn't know who did it at first, after hearing the report from his subordinates, he should have had the answer in his heart. Moreover, Xiejin's words at this time have undoubtedly told him that Xian Yuanyan and Fang Lanyi are both self-inflicted, but even if they are self-inflicted, there must be a careful pusher behind the scenes. When Xiejin reported the progress of the case with Zheng Shangshu, he concealed some important details, but these details can be concealed from Zheng Shangshu who is investigating the case, but not from Rong Yu, otherwise it would be deceiving the emperor. However, there is no direct evidence pointing to that person at present, and Xiejin has done some tricks. Now all the directions of Zheng Shangshu's investigation are placed on Qingfeng Pavilion, but Qingfeng Pavilion is a force that he cannot pry open. So once the deadline is up, Minister Zheng will be dismissed for incompetence. It's pretty tragic to think about it. Rong Yu looked away from the map, picked up the teacup on the table, and said indifferently, tell Xian Yuanqi a message, let him be more restrained in the future, don't be so reckless. Xiejin nodded, yes. Xian Yuanyao was surprised, Prince Qi. Xiejin couldn't help but glance at him again, and Xian Yuanyao's mouth twitched when he saw him. Is it okay if I'm slow? He didn't participate in this case, and he didn't know the hidden story. How could he guess who did it at once? Besides, Xiejin's tone before reporting the case just now sounded like a riddle. He wondered how the master knew it was Xian Yuanqi's doing at once. Sure enough, his brain was not suitable for intrigues with others in the court. Wrong, you didn't say anything else, and explained some things in the military camp. Regarding the case, it seemed that the sentence just now was his attitude, and there was no need to say more. Xiejin understood and bowed to leave. Xian Yuanhua and Xian Yuanchen were left behind, and would be the regent's people in the future. He didn't need to worry about them anymore. He had already reminded them of what was necessary. Their future fate would depend entirely on their luck. When the two walked out of the Kinzen Hall, Xian Yuanyao subconsciously reached out to hook Xiejin's neck, but he didn't know what he thought of, and silently retracted his hand in the middle. What? Xiejin frowned, looking a little sad. Is Yao Yao alienated from me? In public, I am afraid of causing a bad influence, Xian Yuanyao explained. I am more afraid of causing a jin to misunderstand. Xiejin calmly, what misunderstanding? Xian Yuanyao coughed lightly, if a jin falls in love with me dash. There is no if. Xiejin stopped and looked at him seriously. Yao Yao, I already like you. Xian Yuanyao paused and looked at him suspiciously. Really? Xiejin looked at him with a pair of phoenix eyes. Is Yao Yao willing to obey me? Xian Yuanyao was frightened for a while, staring at his rare serious expression, no longer caring about joking. You are not serious. I look like I'm joking. Xiejin frowned. What about you? Do you think I am? No. Absolutely not. Xian Yuanyao took a step back and looked at him warily. I am the only son of my father, Xiejin, and you are also the only legitimate son of the Xie family. This is not a joke. Before he finished speaking, he saw Xiejin's slowly raised lips and the obvious playful expression on his beautiful face. Xian Yuanyao realized that he was being fooled, and immediately became angry. Are you looking for a fight? After speaking, he punched him in the delicate and noble face. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 409. There was a stove burning in the hall, so warm that the cold of winter could not be felt at all. Nan 11 wore an outer robe and leaned on the brocade couch in front of the window, with a soft and warm blanket covering her legs. The sun shone lightly on her face, reflecting her calm and gentle features. Her slender white fingers held a book, and the well-preserved cover was printed with 4 eye-catching gilded fonts, which were upright and solemn. The Secret History of Jinghua. When she had nothing to do, she picked a book to pass the time. It happened that Nan 11 wanted to know more about the life of Empress Jinghua recently, so she asked someone to pick this book from the palace library and send it to her. The records in the history books were written by civil servants who were responsible for compiling and revising the books. They recorded the merits and demerits of Empress Jinghua Xian Yuandanshu throughout her life. Although they were relatively fair and objective, and had a kind of calmness of a bystander, it was impossible to describe the situation and inner thoughts from the perspective of the people in the book. Moreover, the emotions of the emperor were accompanied by too many taboos, and many things even the historians did not dare to record in detail. Danshu ascended the throne at the age of 16 and made contributions to the country for 14 years. Most of the historical books praised her, and the words used were all wise, fair and wise, diligent and loving the people, decisive in killing, punishing corrupt officials, and other descriptions that should appear on the emperor. Empress Jinghua almost never made mistakes in the country. Even the incident of the sudden death of 4 emperors from the 9th year of Jinghua to the 13th year of Jinghua was handled very beautifully and with great skill, and successfully appeased the dissatisfaction and suspicion that the major families had caused. Only a few words mentioned in the book actually hinted at the undercurrent at that time. So much so that the later exposure of the truth triggered a family protest that could almost be called a palace coup. The truth of the emperor's husband's sudden death was revealed, and the anger of the major families approached the Dajhan palace. Even though she was the king of a country, she could not suppress the anger and dissatisfaction of the ministers with thunderous hands. The major families were powerful, and their intricate connections affected the imperial power. Those four lives needed someone to give an explanation. Moreover, Rong Huijin, who was powerful as a servant at the time, had already threatened the interests of the major families. They worked together and spared no effort to eliminate this person, and the sudden death of the four emperors, in addition to triggering their thunderous anger, was also the most logical and once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for them. Empress Jinghua cared about the world and was a wise and fair emperor. Before the truth was exposed, she could still protect him, but now the truth has come out. If she continues to deal with it unfairly, it will damage her reputation as an emperor and even endanger the country and the people, and this is definitely not what Rong Huijin wants to see. How could the one who loved Empress Jinghua with all his heart bear to see the empress she revered as a god fall into a dilemma? So even if he had already taken the position of regent, he was willing to use his life to atone for his sins in the end. He loved her so much that he killed all his rivals with his own hands. As long as the person he loved only had him in his eyes, he couldn't bear to see her being forced and embarrassed, so he ended his life with his own hands. Such a relationship is destined to be a tragedy. The tragedy is that Empress Jinghua was born with the responsibilities of an emperor and had no choice. The tragedy is that Rong Huijin fell in love with someone he shouldn't love, and he grew crazy with paranoia and possessiveness, unable to control his inner demons. The sadness lies in the struggle between the imperial power and the power of the ministers, and the weight of the people of the world and the loved ones in one's heart. Nan 11 saw the righteousness of the country in the book, the praise of the subjects of later generations to the Queen Jinghua, and the records of the behavior of the civil officials and historians, which were attributed to ambition and monopolization of power, but the feelings between the two were rarely mentioned. Therefore, the behavior of the four major families forcing the palace was also crowned with the legitimate excuse of clearing the court. She actually felt nothing. Reading the story in the book is completely like watching someone else's life. She is not in it, and cannot feel the mood of the protagonist at that time, and it is not even as clear as the dream of her first encounter with Rong Huijin. Nan 11 couldn't finish reading the whole book in just half a day, but she accidentally turned over a page, which read, "In the autumn of the 13th year of Jinghua, the emperor's husband, the regent, was seriously ill. The imperial physician was helpless. He rested in the deep palace for several months and finally died on the 18th day of the 12th lunar month. The emperor was extremely sad. Dan Shu ascended the throne at the age of 16, and the next year was the first year. The 13th year of Jinghua was 30 years old. According to the age recorded in the book, Rong Huijin was less than a year older than Dan Shu. Not long after his death, Dan Shu also died. Both of them only lived to the age of 30. There is also a key sentence: in the winter of the 13th year of Jinghua, the regent died. In the first month of the following year, the emperor's body was unwell and gradually weakened. He died on the 9th day of the 3rd lunar month at the age of 30. He had no heir, and the throne was passed to his nephew Xian Yuanhong. No child? Nan 11 closed the book, put it on her legs, and frowned slightly. Empress Jinghua had no heir in her life? This is obviously a bit strange, and it is also a question that has never been thought of before. How could she not have a child after 14 years on the throne? Your Majesty, are you tired of reading? Yin Yu brought some fragrant tea and placed it on the table next to Nan 11. It's time for lunch. My master must be hungry. I'll ask them to prepare lunch. Nan 11's eyebrows relaxed. Why hasn't Rong Yu come back yet? The prince is in the Kinzen palace. Go and tell him to come back to the bedroom. Nan 11 frowned. Your injuries haven't healed yet. How busy are you and don't even have a sense of time? Yin Shuang, who was standing in the outer hall, heard this and silently accepted the order. then turned around and walked quickly towards the Kinzen hall. The master is worried about the prince. Yanyu smiled, maybe the prince is deliberately not taking care of himself, wanting to make the master feel sorry. Nan 11 smiled gently and sighed lightly, Yanyu, do you also think Rongyu wants to be beaten? Huh? Yanyu paused and shook her head quickly, the prince is seriously injured, so he can't be beaten. Rongyu's injury has actually improved a lot. The medicine used by Chu Nanyi is very good. In just 5 or 6 days, he can basically move freely. Although Rongyu is strong and can remain calm with his injuries have indeed improved greatly in the past 2 days. But compared to ordinary people, the injury has not improved to the point where he can be busy overtime, so he should continue to lie down and rest. However, the government affairs are busy, and it is approaching the new year. If nothing is done, the next affairs will only pile up, and even the new year will not be peaceful. Nan 11 lowered her eyes and gently stroked her belly, baby, do you think your father deserves a beating? Indeed, he deserves a beating. Rongyu walked in from outside the palace, wearing a dark black gold woven royal robe that made him look tall and straight, calm and noble. How does your majesty want to beat him? The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 410. When Yunyu saw him coming in, she wisely took the maids in the palace to bow and leave, and went to prepare lunch with others. Nan 11 turned her eyes and looked at the man who came in against the light, with a smile on her lips, as a seriously injured patient who doesn't know how to cherish his body. How do you think he should be beaten? Rongyu pondered for a moment. 11er asked me to kneel on the washboard before, how about giving it a try? Nan 11's expression paused and she looked at him silently. Rongyu walked up to her and raised the corners of his lips slightly. 11er. Kneeling on the washboard is so boring. The corners of Nan 11's lips curled up, and a wicked smile flashed across her eyes. Those who disobey should lie on the bed and be spanked. Rongyu's expression paused. Spanking? Yes. Nan 11 nodded and added casually, take off your pants and beat me. As soon as these words came out, the atmosphere in the palace became subtle for no reason. If 11er really wants to fight, I should cooperate. Rongyu lowered his head and kissed her face, with a hint of seduction in his voice. How about I go over and lie down now? Nan 11 didn't expect him to be so thick-skinned, so she was silent for a moment. Rongyu. Please be aware of the majesty of your regent. Rongyu smiled lowly, his eyes filled with tenderness and brilliance. What dignity do you need in front of 11er? As he spoke, he reached out and stroked her belly. Did the baby have any fuss today? No trouble. He is very quiet. Nan 11 said calmly. Are you done with your work? Rongyu hummed, I'm done with my business. I just took in 2 attendants. I just taught them some rules in Kinzen Hall and what they need to learn to do in the future. 2 bastards from Prince Wei's palace and Prince Jing's palace. Yes. Rongyu sat down next to her, reached out and took away the book on her lap, and held her in his arms. Your Majesty has appointed this book for your servants to read. I dare not neglect it. Nan 11 believed his lies. 11er is reading this. Rongyu's eyes fell on the secret history of Jinghua and his eyes flickered. What do you think? Thoughts? I don't have any special thoughts. Nan 11 stayed quietly in his arms, shaking her head slowly. It's like reading other people's stories. It is indeed other people's stories. Rongyu's voice was low. Most of the things recorded by historians are boring, so don't take them too seriously. What he records are all important events of the family and the country, the merits and demerits of the emperor, and what he records are facts. Interesting or boring is not that important, Nan 11 said calmly, but there is one question that surprised me. Rongyu said, what's the problem? Empress Jinghua lived to be 30 years old and was emperor for 14 years. Why didn't she even have any heirs? Rongyu's hand holding her waist stiffened slightly. Nan 11 noticed his tension, and her eyes naturally fell on his noble and handsome face. Au. She had a child. Rong Yu's voice was calm, as if he was talking about someone else's business. She died when she was only 3 years old. Died at the age of 3? Nan 11 was silent for a moment and nodded slowly. Oh, so that's it? The air became quiet. The sunshine outside the window shone in, and the scene of the two embracing each other looked extremely beautiful and peaceful, but the questions that couldn't help but arise in their hearts were never asked again. Whose was the child who died at the age of 3? Empress Jinghua would definitely not be able to give birth to a child by herself. Although Rong Huijin was already the powerful regent back then, there seemed to be no formal relationship between him and the empress, so did they have any physical intimacy? Empress Jinghua has been taught the standard of an emperor since she was a child. Things between men and women should be different from those of ordinary women in a boudoir. She will not have the understanding that women should always be together, but that an emperor should have 3 palaces and 6 courtyards. Instead, it was the royal husbands in her harem who had to stay together. But based on her feelings for Rong Huijin at that time, even if she had these 4 royal husbands, Dongju might not really have anything to do with them. But if so, what was the reason why Rong Huijin killed 4 people in succession? After all, if they were really in name only and had never been a couple, Rong Huijin would not have to do anything to them. Unless something happened that he couldn't bear. So what was the reason for the death of the 3-year-old child? The son of an emperor should be loved by thousands of people. What are 11er thinking? Rong Yu leaned against her ear, his voice filled with some unspeakable meaning. Want to know more truth? Nan 11 was slightly startled, then slowly shook her head. Why do you know so many truths? If 11er wants to know, there should be a notebook written by Empress Jinghua in the library, Rong Yu said with a bit of strange emotion in his voice. I'll have someone bring it to you. Nan 11's eyebrows moved slightly. The letter from Empress Jinghua. Her mother seemed to have mentioned it before. Want to see it? Nan 11 thought for a moment, shook her head slightly, and looked at the secret history of the Empress on the case. I won't read it. I just use it to pass the time. I don't really have much interest in understanding those things that have been dusted for a long time. But I want to share it with 11er. Nan 11 turned to look at him in surprise. Why are you so interested today? Let's talk the matter out so that there won't be any more suspicion. Rong Yu buried his head in the side of her neck, his voice a bit lazy. I don't want 11er to have a grudge in her heart. Nan 11 frowned. How could that happen? Just in case. Rong Yu's voice was calm. It's better not to take risks. Nan 11 smiled. In that case, just tell me and I'll listen. That child is Rong Huijin's. Rong Yu said. Although there is no official status, everyone in Dongling knows that Rong Huijin has the closest relationship with Empress Jinghua. No one can replace this relationship, so it threatens the interests of many people. Have they ever been husband and wife? Rong Yu nodded. Yes. Then. Nan 11 frowned slightly, and although she was a little hesitant, she still asked, did Empress Jinghua have a close relationship with the 4 imperial husbands? No. Rong Yu was silent for a moment, then slowly shook his head. So they were unwilling to give up, and created one conspiracy after another, trying to alienate Empress Jinghua and Rong Huijin again and again, and even did not hesitate to attack the child. Nan 11 frowned. Since ancient times, the struggle for interests has been cruel and unscrupulous, and men and women are no exception. Rong Yu said in a light voice. The children are just innocent victims. Nan 11 pondered for a moment. So Rong Huijin killed them after the children died. Rong Yu nodded. Yes. Revenge for the children. Revenge is not the main reason. Rong Yu shook his head. It is difficult to explain the twists and turns, but no matter how many reasons there are, Rong Huijin did make a big mistake, which is undeniable. Paused. 11er, if you want to know these details, I will tell you slowly later.